Hey, Husker fans, welcome to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. As always, go Big Red. Good morning, Husker fans, and welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and this is Danny Gillette joining me as always, and we're back here on a Monday morning. And Danny, how you doing this morning?
Good, a little sleepy, but always a busy news cycle for Nebraska. It never rests, so I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah, it never does rest. Sometimes I wish that it would, but it never does. So at any rate, before we get into it, you guys, if you haven't already, please do us the huge favor of hitting subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also subscribe, and find our stuff at Apple, iTunes and Spotify, anywhere else that you can find your podcast as well. So we don't tout that as much as possible, but we still are cranking out the audio versions as well if you don't like the video. So there's that. And at any rate, like Danny said, there's a bunch of new stuff going on. Some Nebraska football injury stuff, some recruiting things. Before our last show, or after our last show, Rienk Mast came out with the medical red shirt. So we're going to talk about that. A little Adrian Martinez. There's plenty of stuff that's going on with Nebraska. There was obviously a big weekend for the baseball and softball teams. Wanted to touch on that quickly. The baseball team took 2 out of 3 from Minnesota. They actually were tied for first place in the Big Ten for a moment on Saturday, lost on Sunday. So they're 1 game back with 6 to go. So a big opportunity there for them to win the Big Ten championship. And the softball team earned a first-round bye for the Big Ten tournament. So that's starting on Thursday. So they're still in the mix, for an NCAA tournament berth, despite all the injuries and stuff that they've gone through. And then, of course, you had the spring volleyball match, a 3-0 win, over Denver there in Kearney. So that was pretty cool to see all the people there. Of course, Harper Murray was suspended. More news there. She's, been accused of the shoplifting and stuff. So kind of an unfortunate situation there. Hopefully, that gets resolved. But as far as the roster status, John Cook pretty much said it's out of his hands at this point. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I guess we'll learn more in the fall. Hopefully, she can finish up the spring semester and get things back on track. But as far as, the injury stuff with Nebraska football, Matt Rhule did a camp in Omaha on Saturday, did an interview with Steve Sipple of Husker Online, and he did provide some pretty key injury updates. I thought Bly Hill, he announced would return at some point this fall. He didn't really say when that was going to be. Demetrius Bell, unfortunately, will be out for the 2024 season. So, Danny, that's 2 pretty significant updates. What are your thoughts on what that means for, the roster next season?
People always ask, why do we have 75 wide receivers? Why are we recruiting wide receivers? And unfortunately, this is why. I mean, injuries at the position happen all the time, and you need depth. Bell has been bitten by the injury bug a couple times in his short Nebraska career now, so it's very unfortunate that he's out for the season. I just hope he can get healthy and, the recovery process goes smoothly, because the rehab process is never fun. And then as far as Bly Hill goes, I think I think that's potentially good news. I hope they don't rush him back and give him time to heal. But when you look at the depth of the 2 positions, corner is definitely a need. So having Hill back and healthy once the season starts, ideally, would be huge.
Yeah, the Bly Hill injury, it's interesting because he said he would be back sometime in the fall. So it's just so, sure, he really doesn't know exactly when. It's good that he'll be back. I'm hoping, they can get him back by conference play. I mean, that would be ideal, or at least, maybe get him into, some snaps before, he gets into Big Ten play. But I was encouraged by that. It did break my heart that Demetrius Bell is out for the season, not just because he has to go through the injury and all that stuff for him personally, which is going to be difficult. But he was really having a good spring. And I know that Nebraska is loaded at wide receiver even without him. I think that's fair to say. I mean, at least compared to where they've been in the past. But he really brought, I thought, a little bit of a different element, a little slot guy, just a really dynamic player. And I was excited to see, what he did in his redshirt freshman year. But hopefully he's able to bounce back. I guess the one good thing is it happened during spring ball. So as far as his recovery timeline, next spring, he should hopefully be back to, close to 100%. And you would think, by 2025, he'll be ready to go as long as everything, goes as it should with his rehab. But still a bummer for, the wide receiver room, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about 2025, it's only May 2024 now, obviously. So that's quite a bit of time. And like you said, we have depth at the wide receiver spot, of course, but it's still unfortunate. I mean, you think about all the hours the kids put in the weight room and on the practice field, and just to have it end, on one play like that before the season even starts is just absolutely heartbreaking.
It is interesting though with the Bly heel injury. Nebraska was kind of showing some interest in transfer portal players. They haven't been that active, but they have been in contact with former Texas cornerback Terrence Brooks. I mean, there's like 20 some schools that have been in contact with him. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say like they're a favorite or a contender even. I mean, to me, in the transfer portal, you have to get the kid on campus before you can even really be considered a contender, unless it's one of those situations where the kid just knows he's going there already, which I mean, we have seen that plenty of times, but unless the kid already knows where he's going and there's some backwards deal or backdoor deal happening, you have to get the kid on campus before it's a real threat, or before you
Right.
can consider it to be a serious contender. But Brooks would be a great fit. He started 19 games. He had 3 interceptions last year, was honorable mention all Big 12. So that would be a nice addition for the Huskers. It'll be interesting to see. I'll be keeping an eye on that to see if they do potentially get him in for a visit or whatever. But beyond that, I think Jeremiah Charles is a name that was brought up that I've heard about. Could be in the mix. Sean Callahan talked about Malcolm Hartzog potentially playing more cornerback, which is they have the depth at safety. If they needed him there. But I guess just personally, my favorite spot for Malcolm is being that slot, nickel type, that
Yeah,
can
me too.
play hybrid cornerback and safety. So I don't really see that as a solution.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see because, like we've kind of alluded to before, this is a positionless defense. So you can, in theory, put players at a bunch of different spots. Obviously, you're not going to put, Hartzog at like defensive tackle, but especially in the defensive backfield, you can kind of rotate guys and see where they fit. And this is why you need depth. So, I think we're at a point where we have enough depth to where we can withstand an injury or two, especially on the defensive side of the football. But even still, there's got to be a lot of mix and matching coming up here in the next couple months, I think.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, the thing is with Hartzog is he's out there whether he's playing cornerback or safety. You can use him to play man coverage if you need to. So I don't think that really matters that much. But whether you have him out there or not, you still need other guys who can cover, man to man. And whether that's a safety or a cornerback, you need to have those guys on your defense. Jeremiah Charles is really interesting to me because he's super. I mean, he's like 6'2" or 6'3" or whatever. He's a big athlete. Recruited as a wide receiver, but he showed, a lot in that dunk competition. He's really come along in the spring too. His name has been mentioned as a guy that's been elevating his game. So he would be somebody to watch. Ethan Nation, I thought, has played well this year. So there's definitely are some options, but it's always interesting to see at least who the team is interested in. You could tell that, I mean, obviously they contacted Dylan Edwards and they've contacted Terrence Brooks. I think they've contacted some other cornerbacks. So if there was a position that they're looking to fortify, I would probably say it's cornerback, but I really don't see him, making a ton of additions here in the spring transfer window.
Bryce Turner, too. I mean, he's a guy that still needs to develop a bit more at the defensive back position, but they also have him as an option. And so they do have options, maybe not as many polished options, but there is depth there. So it'll be interesting to see who emerges in that room.
Yeah, and then there's some freshmen too that could step up and play a role there. So I mean, there's definitely some bodies, but it was nice to have a guy in Bly Hill who started games. I know it was at the FCS level, but still a
Still
productive
counts.
player in
Yeah.
college football. So at any rate, we'll see how that kind of develops and kind of go from there. It will be interesting to see if Nebraska does reach out to any other cornerbacks, because I think that will you know reflect how drastic that need really is. Because with Brooks, it might just be like, oh, he's an all Big 12 player. We have a need. It seems like they're just kind of feeling the temperature. It's not. I don't get the sense that they're like desperate for a cornerback right now. They haven't gone out and contacted like 5 guys.
No, but it's one of those things. I mean, like contacting Dylan Edwards. Like, what do you got to lose? I mean,
Yeah.
at least put your name out there. At least try to see if you can make some headway in a recruitment or a potential, transfer option. And the staff, we've talked about, they're good at closing the deal and sealing the deal, and they can be aggressive when it comes to recruiting. So I'd rather see, too much in terms of interest to players than too little, because we saw too little in the Scott Frost era, and look where it got us.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about that in a second too, the Scott Frost era with Adrian Martinez. But first, Rienk Mast. So after our last show, because we didn't end up doing our chat on Saturday, it was reported that Rienk Mast, or it was announced, I guess I should say, that Rienk Mast is going to medically redshirt for this season. He's going to have surgery. He's going to miss the entire thing. He'll be back for the 2025-26 season. That's crazy to say. That seems like forever away.
I know, doesn't
it? Yeah, but I guess we're already we're going into the 2024-25 season, so it makes sense. But Rienk Mast, who's third team All Big Ten, won't be on the team. So obviously that leaves, another big hole. You're losing. I mean, in terms of postseason honors, you're losing your two best players in Tominaga and Rienk Mast. Obviously, Casey's, very, he's a superstar and he does all those other things. But Rienk Mast is a very quality player too. So how much does this hurt Nebraska basketball? And I guess, does it change, your outlook for this season in terms of the Huskers potentially getting back to the NCAA tournament?
No, I mean, honestly, this is why they got Andrew Morgan, I think. And I thought that at the time that maybe, Rienk wasn't coming back or there was something up because they got Andrew Morgan. And I forget who tweeted, like, this was like the worst case off season for Nebraska basketball and blah, blah, blah. No, it's exactly what we expected. I forget who it was. It was some reporter that I really don't like. And I don't know why I can't think of his name, but
I'll find it. Yeah, I think it was, how was it?
Mitch.
No, it wasn't Mitch. It was
Dirk. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Dirk. What's his last name? I'm blanking on the last name though.
Dirk
Shatelin.
I don't want to butcher his last name because although I don't like him, you could clearly tell he's never watched a second of Nebraska basketball. But he said this was like the worst case off season for Nebraska, and it's just like, shut up. It's not the worst case off season for Nebraska. I mean, we knew it was coming. I mean, we kind of knew that once they picked up Morgan that, okay, maybe something's going on with Rienk, and the transfers that left, it looks bad because it's a transfer, but outside of Jamarcus Lawrence, the production from the other transfers didn't really move the needle, in my opinion. So, I mean, and, Casey graduated, so that's no surprise. So to say it was the worst case offseason, I mean, it went kind of honestly how we expected, and that's not something we're used to in Nebraska land either. But still, I mean, now Andrew Morgan's at the center of this in terms of filling that positional hole. I think it was smart for Nebraska to kind of get ahead in the sense that he recruited in the second he committed in the second week of April, and so Nebraska kind of had a backup plan. I think they probably knew something was coming. So although the loss hurts because of Mast's experience and his scoring ability and all that, I think the program itself is well prepared for this loss, if you know what I mean. Like, they kind of had a backup plan. They didn't really wait too long. They knew that they needed somebody to fill the void. They went out and got him in April, and now we're rolling with Andrew Morgan.
So the comment from Dirk Shatelin, I have no idea if that's correct. So sorry, Dirk, if I mess up your name. But at any rate, so he said, Fred Hoiberg is a very good coach, but this is not exactly the offseason you envision following the first NCAA tournament run in 10 years. So it
is. You got a senior, you got an injury, which we knew about. I mean, we got some transfers who barely played outside of Jamarcus Lawrence, who's going to Rhode Island. Maybe I'll go up and watch a couple of his games. I mean, this is the offseason you envision. This is college basketball. I'm sorry. Hello.
Yeah, well, it's your offseason, there was no way that, you weren't going to have Keisei Tominaga, so that hurts. And then, I think I quote tweeted it and said, so it's Fred Hoiberg's fault that Rienk Mast got hurt. I mean,
Yeah.
What he did do though, I mean, obviously he couldn't go out and I mean, what Fred Hoiberg went out and did is basically got a clone, like you said, of Rienk Mast. I mean, Andrew Morgan averaged 13 points and 5 rebounds last year for North Dakota State. Shot 36% from three, 58% from two. I mean, so he's really a very similar type of player. Was an all
Yeah.
league player. So I mean, I think he's going to fit in perfectly with what Nebraska wants to do. And then they get Braxton May from Washington.
Oh,
And
did we
you
talk
know,
about him at all? I don't know if we talked about him
we
at all.
yeah, we did talk about him a little bit on the last episode, but still, I think that's I don't think people are giving that addition the full credit. I mean, this is a very athletic
Yeah.
player and all defensive player in the Pac-12 2 years ago. So, I mean, if you look at it from this perspective, yes, I understand. Like you said, if you just don't, dig into it at all, which is kind of what Dirk was saying about John Rothstein, because somebody posted the Braxton May commitment, and he's like, and Dirk's response is, well, it's hard to conclude they've gotten better. Rothstein doesn't scrutinize ever, and I mean, yeah, there's maybe some truth to that, but
And in the
even
meantime, you have Dirk, who scrutinizes everything or
yeah,
doesn't watch the games or
e-
whatever. So interesting
even
paradox
even the
there.
Huskers play-by-play guy Kent Pavelka, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. I'm not
I
sure.
no, I think you got that one right. So
Okay, I think I did. So cool enough. As I clicked on this, I realized that he follows the Husker Big Red Twitter page, so
he
that's
follows
cool.
me. So shout out to Ken.
Um,
He's a good
yeah,
guy.
he's legit. He's the
Yeah.
best. He is literally the best play-by-play guy in college basketball. He is. I mean, we are so fortunate to have him. I love when people put the highlights, for this play-by-play. Freaking awesome, and
For
his
all
his
the bad
calls are.
reporters we have, some may say, including us, we have a good set of play-by-play people. We got Gary, we got Kent,
Yep. Yeah,
we
we're
got some
lucky.
really, really classic guys that know how to call a game on the radio. And the art of radio sports is, I wouldn't say lost now, but the mediums have shifted, and those two in particular do a great job.
So, anyways, so he replied to Dirk with where the Huskers transfer portal class ranks, which I thought was interesting. And then Dirk came back and said, do they also have a top 10 ranking for most significant losses? Because it's hard to believe that Nebraska is better now than it was 4 months ago. And then Kent responded, we should discuss this beyond X post. There are nuances I can share that diminish the value of one-off tweets. And then Dirk responds, sounds good. I see the upside of the roster. I also think it's hard to argue that Nebraska is better than 2023-24. That was the goal entering the offseason. I mean, I don't know if that was really the goal. I mean, the goal is to make the
No.
best team that you can.
Yeah.
And so you have, yes, there's probably, I mean, it might be hard to look at the roster without Casey and say it's going to be better, but
Yeah.
in some ways, as I was going to say before I kind of got into this, I mean, Nebraska added. I mean, we looked at that Texas A&M game. I think every Nebraska fan looked at this team and was like, "We need to improve the defense." And the same thing, I thought the same thing in the Illinois game when they just ran over us to the basket through the entire second half. There was nobody.
Literally ran over.
I mean,
Literally
literally,
ran over us.
yeah, literally. It was like, I mean, it was like a bull in the china shop, but we got called for a foul every time.
Yep.
But I think every fan came away saying we need some rim protection and we need somebody that actually can guard play on ball defense. And they went out and got Raleigh Wooster, a point guard, an actual point guard, which they did not have last season. And that hurt them in the NCAA tournament because Casey was not a point guard. He should have never been trying to play. I mean, he really didn't, but they had nobody that could really handle that position. And so Wooster, I think, is not only a good creator, but he's a really good defender. And he's 6'4", so he's not as big as Sam Griesel, but that was a kind of a luxury with Griesel, is that he was big enough that they could put him on the bigger guards, and then they could let Casey play the smaller, smaller guards.
They didn't have that luxury last year.
Yeah, they didn't have. So that, to me, that's an upgrade defensively and just at your point guard position. And then you had May, who's an all defensive, Pac-12 player, averaged 1.6 blocks 2 years ago, and he can finish around the rim. He can take lobs. You can lob the ball up to him in the ball screen game. He's not, going to sit out there and shoot a bunch of threes and stuff like that, but he made like 70%, of his field goal attempts. He also had, I think, over 2 offensive rebounds per game. That same year, he earned all Pac-12 defensive honors. So this guy can rebound, he can defend, and he's basically, Josiah Alec, but a more athletic shot blocker. And then you've replaced your needs there. And I think, Connor Segan and Gavin Griffiths, I think both have a lot of upside, especially
Yeah.
I feel like Gavin Griffiths and Connor Segan. I mean, he just needs to, they just need to get the guy he was 2 years ago as a freshman. I mean, he's already had a season where he scored 11 points per game and made almost 2 3-pointers per game. So they have guys that have actually produced in major conferences, or have at least done, like Gavin Griffiths. I know, sure, his numbers don't look great. That's fine, but go look at Keisei Tominaga when he came here. He came here from a junior college. I mean, even after his second season, which was not last year, but before the 2023 or 2022-23 season. I mean, he was basically viewed as like a marginal player off the bench, and then by the end of that season, like halfway through, he became an All Big Ten player. So I really think that it's discounting like the player development side of things, and which I think Fred Hoiberg is very good at. And it also is discounting what the Huskers have done to shore up their defensive, side of things, which was a big issue last year.
Heck, I'd take the Connor Segan that scored, 15 points against us back in January off the bench. He was absolutely shooting the lights out. And I don't know. I don't know what Dirk was thinking there. It just really kind of ticked me off, because it's like you clearly don't watch the games, and a bunch of people have you on mute because they're sick of your crap. I don't know. Not that we're like the, Walter Cronkite of Husker journalism, but I don't know. Dirk is just something else, man.
Yeah, I mean, I understand overall what his point, but it's like,
I guess, but to not envision this offseason, if there's one thing that has actually gone the way Husker fans have thought it would go, it's been this offseason.
Yeah. I mean, they have a top 10, class for transfers. So,
and this is the way that college basketball is now too. It's not like, because you don't see the 2024 recruiting class being huge. It's been mostly built off transfers, and that's the way that Fred's wanted to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, especially with how old the game is. Now, some of that will change, I think, after this year, because the COVID year will be completely gone. Because guys that were like Hunter Dickinson played that COVID year, and so he's going to use that extra year to play at Kansas this year. So this is really going to be getting rid of that extra year. So that should put a little bit more focus on high school recruiting, but not much. I mean, it's really going to be about the transfer portal, because you just need a few guys here or there to build a team. And so to me, yeah, you're just trying to build the best team that you can. And so you think about it, you've got two guys in Bryce Williams and Juwan Gary who are proven productive in the Big Ten. So I feel very good about them. Segan and Griffiths have already played in the Big Ten. Raleigh Wooster's been and may have been, high major productive players on both ends of the floor. So I feel good about adding them. And then, yeah, Andrew Morgan, sure, he's going to have to, make that step up. But Fred has proven, or at least, shown a very strong ability to evaluate which transfers are going to fit in and do well at Nebraska. Right. I mean, Sam Griesel, transferred up and did well. Rienk Mast transferred up and did well. And it's a very similar.
Eric Walker. Well, I don't know if he transferred up, but he did well.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, and then I mean, with Rienk Mast and Andrew Morgan, they are the very similar type of player. We talked about that, when they transferred. I mean, I thought that they could have played together, if they were both healthy, obviously. But he's coming in. He has one more season, and so he can play this year, graduate, and then Rienk Mast can take that spot back. So they still need to add some help. I think they're trying to add a 4. You could always add more experience on the, in the backcourt. That could always be another thing, another guy on the wing. But I think they have right now you could roll the ball out and you'd have Raleigh Wooster starting, and then you might have your starting lineup might be Wooster, Bryce Williams, Juwan Gary, Andrew Morgan, and Braxton May from Washington. That would be, you could do that. That's the things they have some.
Do you think Griffiths would mostly be a bench guy, or because he was he didn't really have an expanded role at Rutgers, but he showed, flashes when given, more minutes?
I think it just depends how Fred wants to play, because you could also have a lineup where, Morgan's your 5, Gary's your 4, Bryce is your 3, and then you have either a Segan or, Griffiths as your 2 guys. So, and then one of those guys would come off the bench, and then you'd have May come off the bench.
Which I like.
Aaron,
to me. I mean,
yeah, and then Aaron Eulis too as the point guard.
Yeah.
I'm basically assuming he's going to be back this year. You've got so that they could still use some more 3-point shooting off the bench. I mean, I think, like you have your like Wiltshire replacement, but you could still use that other for like Jamarcus Lawrence. You could still use another guy there. I mean, ideally they would add to me. I think they could use a big who could play the 4 and 5.
Mm.
And then like kind of a combo guard wing like CJ who could play the 2 and the 3. If they could get a couple guys like that in the portal, I feel like that would be ideal. But it wouldn't surprise me, if they left one scholarship spot open, which they did last season. So I'd expect them to make 2 additions, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. And but yeah, I still think right now, as the team is constructed, I think they have a better than 50% chance to make the NCAA tournament. I don't bet because I feel like that if I bet on it would be unlucky. But if I was advising people like, hey, I would say that I think Nebraska would make the NCAA tournament. I'm not saying they're going to go on a run or whatever, but I still think that this was a successful offseason. And you can't, saying the question, were they better than last year? I mean, obviously they lost one of the best players in program history, but I feel like that they have got the pieces where if everything works out right, they still could be better next year.
Yeah, I think this is an NCAA tournament team. I'm not going to guarantee, like you said, any big wins or any big run, but I think this is an NCAA tournament team. To call this a not ideal offseason, I mean, I think this is exactly how we thought it was going to go. And it's more just bait for people to talk about like we're doing right now. So, I think the development and what we're going to get out of Griffiths and Asigan is going to be extremely important. I mean, obviously, you know, Braxton is coming off injuries and things like that. But when you talk about just overall shooters, especially Asigan, I think you know, what he does here in terms of his role and what he can provide either off the bench or can he get back to, his freshman year type of player. I think that's going to be important, and it'll be interesting to see how he functions on this roster, having been developed by a pretty good shooter himself in Coach Hoiberg.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the thing, I think about if Keisei Tominaga played at Rutgers, would he be Keisei Tominaga that we know? I don't know. I mean, it's not that he's not a good player, but fit and system and all that stuff really matters. And Fred Hoiberg, he knows how to coach offense. He knows how to coach shooters. I can almost guarantee you, I'm not saying that, Gavin Griffiths is going to be an all Big Ten player, but Fred Hoiberg will get the most out of him.
Yep.
And there is a ton to work, like in terms of just pure raw talent, like Gavin Griffiths has way more than Keisei Tominaga could ever wish to have. I mean, he's got the size, he's got the handles, he can shoot the lights out. He just played in one of the worst offensive teams in the Big Ten, and they're just not. Right. I mean, I really don't think if Tominaga went there, I don't think he would have been as successful because I just don't think Rutgers is as good as creating shot opportunities as Fred Hoiberg is, and I think he's one of the best coaches in all of college basketball at doing that. Frankly, that's what he does, and he's coached in the NBA. Like Fred Hoiberg can coach ball, you know what I mean? So I trust him completely, and I mean on the overall point, maybe Nebraska probably isn't. Entering the season, I can agree with the point that they're not as good as last year, but I still feel like they retooled this roster in a really good way. So there's that. And now to close things up, I want to talk about Adrian Martinez, our old buddy, Adrian Martinez, who, played quarterback for Nebraska and, went through a lot of battles, had some good times, probably more rough times, mostly at the end of games, but is really killing it right now in the United Football League. I mean, had four touchdowns this week. Like 3 in the first half. He's, basically his team has clinched a playoff berth on the USFL division, and he's probably the leading candidate to be MVP. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets a shot at the NFL. But do you think that's like another indictment of the Scott Frost quarterback development tree?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there was so much pressure put on him, and granted, I was ready to move on from the Adrian Martinez era, but he was literally the entire weight of the program was put on his shoulders, even when he was hurt and things like that. And for all his fumbles and end of game, miscues, there was no denying that he wanted to be out there and he wanted to play. And he must be relieved not to have to play in the pressure cooker that is Nebraska anymore. So yeah, I'd say that's a big indictment.
It's interesting because man, right now he's looking like the guy that everybody thought he was going to be like circa 2019, and we all thought we were going to win the Big Ten West or whatever. But at any rate, it's been fun to watch. I know he finished his career at Kansas State, but he'll still always
And
be,
he also did well there too. So
yeah,
mm.
yeah. It helps if you have a better team around you. It does help.
Yeah, and a competent coach.
Yeah, competent. That doesn't hurt either. So anyway, did you watch the Tom Brady roast at
I
all? Did you
did.
catch any of
I
that?
did.
I have to watch it, but I saw some of the
Oh, okay.
highlights.
I
But
won't say anything, but yeah.
I saw some clips though, and I just want to watch it because of Bill Belichick. What he said to Gronk just cracked
Yeah.
me up because Gronk is kind of cringy a little bit. I like his enthusiasm, but like he doesn't really. He mostly just is like. He's like, that's great, but he just says it in his Gronk way. Like he really doesn't offer that much analysis. He's just like
Yeah.
really excited, but that's okay too.
I miss those days. I really do. I've seen all those guys up on the stage, Edelman, Amendola, Gronk, Bill, Tom. I miss those days.
I did see what Tom said about the Deflategate. Do you think he was being
Yeah.
serious? I'm not sure if he was being serious about that or not.
Well, I mean, the whole thing was stupid. And now LeGarrette Blount scored 4 touchdowns that game. It was 45-7. I mean, it really was like a whole, I'm not going to use witch hunt because everybody loves to use that buzzword, but it really was a crock of shit. I mean, 45-7, 4 rushing touchdowns. I think Brady threw for less than 200 yards that game. It was crazy, and although in a way I kind of have to thank the NFL because it pissed Tom Brady off, and he came back and won the Super Bowl the year he was suspended. So there you go.
And for another point where it doesn't really matter, because then after that Colts game, 2 weeks later, they played the Seahawks, which was, if Seattle had won that game, I think they would have more of a legacy as like one of the greatest defenses of all time, but against one of the greatest secondaries ever. And Tom Brady's team was down by 10 points in the fourth quarter. And the NFL or whoever, I mean, they had no control. Like the footballs, there was no issue there. And he scored 2 touchdowns. I mean, that fourth quarter performance, I think that might be one of his best games ever. I mean, I know the Falcons won, he did that, but to put together 2, and they were like 80-yard drives too against the Seahawks. I just remember being like, when they got down by 10 points, I was like, oh, they're toast. They are done. And Tom just went, I don't think he missed a throw after that, and so I know everybody talks about that Falcons game, but I look at that second half, that fourth quarter, especially of that Seahawks game, like that was the best Tom Brady I've ever seen. So anyway, that's my final thought for
that was 10
podcast.
years ago now, but
that's insane. That is literally insane. I can't believe that's 10 years ago.
I know, and it was weird seeing like Drew Bledsoe like graying and like that was the.
I saw his comment was pretty funny.
Yeah. No, I feel bad. I do feel bad for him, honestly, because he got injured, but I have to wonder, like, if that didn't happen, what would the course of Patriots history be then?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the thing about it with Drew that I like is he got his Super Bowl ring and he at least did get to contribute, because Brady got knocked out in that AFC Championship game and Drew came in and threw that touchdown pass. I want to say to David Patton. Yeah,
it was
Pittsburgh.
David Patton against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and so I just feel like I'm glad that he legitimately got to contribute to that instead of just being, the backup quarterback. Like the Patriots don't win that Super Bowl, don't even make it to the Super Bowl if Drew Bledsoe doesn't come in and was like classic Drew Bledsoe that game.
But I don't think Bledsoe gets enough credit from like all the younger Patriots fans, because that's the other thing. People will say, "Oh, Tom, bandwagon Tom Brady Patriots fans." Well, Tom Brady, the dynasty lasted 20 years, so. I mean, when that AFC Championship game against Pittsburgh in 01 happened, I was 6. So you have an entire contingent of fans that have grown up with Brady, and it was awesome. I mean, I miss Brady. I need to get on his anti-aging routine because I look older than he is right now. So, I mean, he's an absolute stud. Alex Guerrero, yeah, he was there too. There were a lot of Alex Guerrero jokes. I won't spoil it for you, but definitely watch it whenever you have the time. It's worth it. I mean, Comedy Central roasts are a little more kind of reined in, but this Netflix one, I thought they did a really good job.
Yeah, once I saw Bill Belichick was there, I was like, okay, I gotta. Is that Bill? Bill's fun. Bill has a personality. People don't give him credit for it, but he's actually pretty funny. And so, at any rate, I love Bill. I still think he's
good. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I still think he's the greatest football coach in NFL history. So I don't care what the haters say, or it's like, yeah, Vince Lombardi had some bad seasons too. We went to the Redskins for a year and was not good. So I mean, nobody's it's like, yeah, Phil Jackson wouldn't have been a great coach without Kobe and Michael, but Kobe and Michael also didn't win very many titles without those guys. So I mean, it goes both ways. It's that I hate the debate. It's like I like what Tom Brady said. Is like, why do people? I mean, even though they had all that hate, kind of, he's still at the end of the Patriots, show is basically like, I just don't understand why there has to be that, one or the other. They did it together. I don't think they would have done the same thing apart. So that's my final thought on that.
There was a joke that Jeff Ross made about Robert Kraft's massage parlor incident in front of Robert Kraft, and Tom actually got up and said, "Hey, you gotta cut that out. Don't do another one like that." So there was a little bit of censoring, but
I did hear that. Yeah, he went up there and was like, "Don't." Yeah, that was funny. But anyway, see, I didn't get that joke, but I forgot that because Robert Kraft got in trouble for that, didn't he?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's fun. So that's funny because I thought it was about Tom, but actually, so he's defending Robert Kraft. So that tells you who Tom Brady. I mean, a lot of people hate on Tom Brady that know absolutely nothing about Tom Brady. So, like, if you know his story, like his entire story, like the dude only got to Michigan because him and his dad literally cut up highlight tapes of him and sent them all around to the country. And then Michigan had like a quarterback, that didn't want to come late. So they just like offered him a scholarship as a flyer. He was their 6th-string quarterback. And Lloyd Carr was like, just get the hell out of here, transfer. And Tom Brady went in there the next day. And Lloyd Carr thought he was going to say he was going to transfer. And he was like, no, I'm staying. And I will be your starting quarterback someday. And it's like
he backed up former Yankees pitcher, Drew Henson.
Yeah. And they screwed that up. That was annoying. But, and then when the day he was drafted, or not the day he was drafted, but I love when he met Robert Kraft and, he was like, I'm the best investment that you've ever made. Like, that's who Tom Brady is. And so I don't know, he built himself from nothing into the greatest football player in NFL history in the game that's ever seen. So that's pretty incredible to me.
There was a large Boston contingent, obviously, at the roast, which I was very proud of. There were a lot of Boston people that I recognized, a lot of Boston celebrities. So that was really cool too. And I would have liked to have been there. It was a who's who of Patriots history and celebrities, and it was awesome. So if any of you watching this are Patriots fans or football fans, it's definitely worth a watch. Even if you're not a Patriots fan, it was pretty funny, and Kevin Hart did a good job hosting, and Jeff Ross is always I wonder what Jeff Ross does outside of these roasts. Like, he must make a really fat check on each one of these. And I know he does comedy shows and stuff, but I only see Jeff Ross on these roasts, and he does a good job. So he must make bank off these roasts, I imagine.
He must. And so anyway, I better get going, you guys. There's the Patriots portion of our podcast as always. So at any rate, thanks for liking and subscribing. Have a great rest of your week. We'll be back with another episode probably on Wednesday. So have a great day and go Big Red.
Go Big Red.